With the introduction of aerial spraying of tobacco crops about 1956 came the real risk of accidents. Tobacco fields in this region are crisscrossed with power transmission lines, and these were responsible for most of the accidents that occurred in the 10-year period that the small aircraft were used. This accident at Meriang in the summer of 1959 saw the aircraft hit power lines and flip over on its back before coming to rest in a roadside paddock. The pilot was not seriously injured and the plane was repaired to fly another day. This aircraft belonged to Superspread Australia, a Melbourne company who at one stage had several aircraft operating in the district. Only weeks earlier, another tiger moth had crashed in a tobacco crop at Buffalo River, wrecking the aircraft, while another crashed and burned at Ovens in the same year. Dangerous work for pilots in the 1950s, spraying insecticide onto tobacco crops. In the late 1950s, everyone was crazy about go-karts. The small machines fascinated the young, and it was go-kart races most weekend. The first track in the district was built on McGuffey's farm at Meriang, where the town youth would gather to have a go or just watch as the races would go on all day. The small two-stroke motors that powered the machines were hotted up to get extra speed required, while some go-karters fitted high-revving chainsaw engines in an attempt to be the fastest kart of the time. It was these small machines and the competition they created that saw the establishment of the Myrtleford Speedway. From go-karts came the more powerful TQs and the bikes and stock cars that race on the speedway today. However, back in 1959, go-karting was the rage and Meriang was the local venue. The last regular steam-hauled train rattled down the valley from Bright on a warm April day back in 1959. The familiar hissing that could be heard for miles had come to an end as the steam whistle was heard no more after this day. Many will remember the steam trains that used to travel up and down the line, especially at night when the whistle would sometimes wake the town. All we have now are these filmed memories of a steam era that lasted 100 years. Myrtleford has had many characters over the years, men and women who were so well known and loved by the community. Zephyr Can was one of these. Zephyr was a full-blooded Indian and lived on a small property at Basin Creek north of the township. Zephyr was married and together with his wife, who he called affectionately Peaches and Cream, used to come into town every so often for supplies and to have a chat with all who came by. On this autumn day in 1959, Zephyr took some of the town kids for a ride in his gig right down the main street. The kids would always crowd around Zephyr and listen to his many stories, so on this day it didn't take very long to get a load for the gig. Peaches and Cream died in the early 1960s, while Zephyr was found dead in his small house some months later. A colourful character, remembered by all who knew him, Zephyr Can was part of Myrtleford and part of life as it used to be. The now famous Myrtleford Rodeo had its humble beginnings at the football ground in the 1950s. The local RSL club established what is today's premier event. In the following year, yards and chutes were constructed at the recreation reserve and the rodeo found a new home. But in the first years, the event was an exciting entertainment that brought crowds of fans to Myrtleford for the day. The primitive setup at the football ground in the 50s is a far cry from today's modern facilities. Tents and makeshift yards added colour to the early events. These were the days when volunteers worked together and riders entered free of charge just to win a small prize. It was long before the Golden Spurs were even thought of. After one of these events, all the horses were driven down the main street of town, which, as you could imagine, added some colour to the event and gave visitors something to go home with. This small piece of movie film may be the only record of the last rodeo to be run on the town's football ground way back in 1958. billy cart derby brought the kids of the town out in the late summer of 1959. The Saleyard Hill, as it was known in those days, was the perfect venue for this type of event, and great rivalry had built up over the preceding weeks, as everyone, it seemed, wanted to build a billy cart and enter the great race. There are all shapes and sizes, with one local lad whose dad owned a motor garage having a near professional model. Just who organised the event is lost through time, but a crowd of onlookers lined the side of the road for the many races. With prizes given by local businesses, competition was fierce, and a few thrills and spills added more excitement to the event. These old pictures of the Saleyard Hill are a reminder of how that part of the town looked in 1959, a far cry from today's development in that area, where the municipal offices were established in 1967. Part of life as it used to be, as Myrtleford kids have fun on the hill nearly 50 years ago.